why do you like debating so much? Like, why do you believe in debating as a format that can do good? Obviously, it does good numbers for you, and people like watching you debate. But like, what is it about the practice of debating that just keeps you wanting to keep doing it? Just tell me about your love of debating.
I just think I'm just a very argumentative and contentious person. I just think it's very, very fun. I've been arguing with everyone I can for my entire life. I am unbearable in person. Any ex-partner of mine or any family member or any friend will testify to that. It is just my nature. I just love doing it. And I'm very happy that there is, a niche of political, I would argue, political effectiveness that can be mined out there. Debate obviously is a centerpiece of political engagement. It has been for as long as modern politics has been around. And people like ideas clashing, confronting directly. Now, often people criticize this. They say, well, sophistry is the nature of political engagement. It has nothing to do with truth. It has everything to do with witty one-liners and getting people to remember hook phrases and, dirty politics. And to that I say, you're completely correct. But just because the game is rigged doesn't mean we're not allowed to participate in it. You don't you don't get to not play. That's like saying that you shouldn't. Let's say leftist revolutionaries shouldn't like prepare for conflict because they are unfairly disadvantaged against the tyrannical government they look to overthrow. What kind of excuse is that? I mean, you still have to try, don't you? I happen to be pretty good at it. I think, and by the way, I should say, it's not just a big political, like big sweeping thing. The skills that you use in debate, the basic rhetorical skills, are skills of persuasion and of confidence. And people in my audience learn those. And even if people in my audience aren't out there debating to audiences of thousands of people, they do talk with their family. They do talk with their friends. Lord knows how many emails I've gotten saying, effectively, thank you for giving me the skills to debate my parents. They accept my trans identity now. They usually don't phrase it that directly, but I've gotten quite a few emails to that effect. Remarkable work can be done with a bit of persuasive talent, and if I can teach that, if anything else, I think that's valuable.
You know what? As someone that I don't know if you relate to this at all. As someone that grew up in a pretty Christian household and went to the school of cringe atheist YouTube back in my youth. Learning a couple of rhetorical tricks from a YouTuber in those early stages of moral development that can be useful. That's a good thing to have in your toolkit as you're trying to express yourself to people in your life before you have all the tools yourself.
Undeniably. And I mean, that's the value in a lot of ways of the internet, right? You get essentially unrestricted access to a huge range of political opinions that otherwise you wouldn't really have access to. Of course, that can be a very bad thing, depending on how the cosmic dice are rolled. But I think it also, the window it gives into some people's lives, people who maybe grow up in a repressive fundamentalist household, a few minutes of content online can fundamentally restructure the rest of their life. It can shape the path they're going to take irrevocably in a way that they might not have been able to otherwise. And that's something that we should do our best to maximize as long as we send people on the good roads.
Did you experience that? Did you experience that yourself?
I'm fortunate to have had very open-minded parents from the get-go. While I learned plenty online, I never felt as though I was breaking free of their reign. If anything, they've moved more over to me with time. As one of the reasons I say liberals can be moved over with X or with Y is because that's happened with my parents. They see what's happening in the country right now. It's very difficult to remain moderate under these circumstances.
Right, yeah. So what did you like? I imagine that you were always pretty articulate and you did your homework for a long time, but like, was there like, did it take you a while to get good at debating, from the MAGA, what am I talking about? The MAGA agitators? Like, is that something that you think you slipped into completely naturally from the first time you started doing it? Or do you think you got better at it the more reps you got? Like, how did you kind of develop those skills?
I think I came in on a good foot, largely because I've always really enjoyed public speaking, and I've always been, this is kind of a cliche sentiment, but I was a bit of a class clown back in high school. So getting people to laugh, the skills required to get people to laugh are almost indistinguishable from the skills necessary to win debates. This is one of the reasons why comedians often do really well in disarming political figures when they speak with one another. It's very, very effective. There's just a sort of subversive language employed in comedy that's really good at disarming the purported self-seriousness of political figures, which is one of the reasons that comedians historically have been, political agitators, very effective at sort of satirizing political figures and often feared by people in power. But anyway, I had those skills going in. In terms of, you know, getting better over time, I used to get a lot angrier while debating. Um,
Yeah.
I got so mad, which led to some pretty funny moments, don't get me wrong, but I'm a lot more detached now. I think an effective rule of public speaking, I don't get nervous when I speak publicly, but a lot of people do. And a good rule to public speaking is don't imagine you're the one doing the speaking. Imagine you're a supportive member of the audience watching you speak. When an insult is thrown at you, maybe you fluster, but the person in the audience doesn't fluster. They just think, oh, what retort is my guy going to come up with next? It allows you to distance yourself from the personal engagement. Think of it a bit more strategically. And I've done that more with time. And I tend to be remarkably calm during convos now. Or at least
Yeah.
as calm as I want to be. I should say I have more control over how calm I am during convos now.
How do you prepare going into a debate? Do you do any preparation work at this point? You just kind of go in there and fire it off? Like, how do you, what is the kind of homework you do when you're, on air with Charlie Kirk the next morning, whatever?
If there's a very specific topic that is going to be discussed, I will do research on it, usually something very technical, or if I know that some study is going to come up. But for the most part, I try not to do any research at all. It's kind of a point to my channel. I often feel the arguments that I'm pushing against are so bad that a person can push against them with very minimal education on the subject. A cursory glance at a Wikipedia article will give you enough ammunition to debunk almost any argument presented on the Senate floor by Republicans. And I want to hold true to that. I don't want to gatekeep what I do. 98% of what I do and what I get in my channel is rhetorical, a skill that I do my best to teach people who watch me.
Wow.
But in terms of like the gate kept like knowledge base, honestly, I think you're doing many of these conservatives too much respect by researching stuff beforehand, because every time I do this, the research stuff never comes up. We always get hung up on some really obvious basic shit beforehand. It just never ends up working out. Did you hear about that Heritage study, the Heritage Foundation study on trans youth health care accessibility with minor consent? Did you hear about this? It came out yesterday.
No, I mean, maybe if it rings a bell, but yeah, tell me more.
Yeah, I went over it because, okay, Heritage Foundation, great. Don't trust these people, but we have to know the data, don't we? I might as well have not bothered. In the future, when somebody brings up that study, I might as well just make a farting noise with my mouth and smack them. That study is dog shit. It's absolutely worthless. There's no point. I read it only to educate myself on the severity of its incompetence. There was no, like, this is what I get. This is what I'm rewarded with, for bothering to look into this stuff. This is the level that they feel entitled to participate at. It's just, first of all, and this is a purely egotistical response, but I do find it more than a little bit insulting. And second of all, like, when I talk with conservatives, this isn't even what comes up, It all turns into to arm wrestling. I think that, listen, I'm not an anti-intellectual, okay? Researching and thoroughly understanding a subject is a beautiful thing, and I think intrinsically worthwhile, even if it can't be put to any immediate use. I think that knowledge is incredibly valuable. But when it comes to arguing against conservatives, especially, so often, that's just not the subject at hand. And I want people in my audience to feel that confidence. I want them to feel, I don't want them to ever be presented with an argument from a conservative and think, oh, because I'm not familiar with this one specific bit of info, I have no chance here. Odds are you have every chance. Ask basic questions. Hey, can you tell me a bit about this study? What did they test for? What were they measuring? Oh, can you tell me about these results? They're never able to answer these questions because they usually are just memorizing talking points anyway. So, yeah.
Yeah. You obviously you do a lot of debates on the channel. We're going to talk more about that in a second. Like, I don't know, how do you resist the satisfaction of just purely being in this game to epically dunk, as you put it? Because obviously you're very measured. That's not really the kind of posture you bring to a lot of, not that you like, you'll go after bad arguments and things like that. But I don't know, how are you able to kind of remove the kind of ego bump from the satisfaction of having a really good comeback in debate to kind of focus more on your sort of interest in education, or or just giving a better message to young men that might be radicalized the wrong way?
I don't want to be, I don't want to come off as priestly here. I love me my dunks. I think they're very fun, but I think they're also very easy. It's not the most satisfying part of what I do, not by a long shot. Um, what I've noticed after, like, I've consumed an ungodly amount of internet content here, a lot of internet dunks. And the fact of the matter is, getting a really good dunk doesn't require that much intelligence. A basic situational awareness and a bit of comedic timing is all you need to get a good dunk in most situations. It's a low bar. But oftentimes, I'll say this much. The feeling of completely deconstructing a bad argument to the point where months later you're going to get emails from the former followers of a person you debated saying, you pulled me off of this road. I really appreciate it. You helped me see how bad these arguments were. That is infinitely more satisfying than a dunk. If the dunks lead to that, if the rhetorical engagement builds that, puts people in that position, I think that's a wonderful thing. But that, to me at least, is the most satisfying feeling. So maximizing for that's what I care about.
I mean, you talked before that the dunk is a good way to get people to click on the video to absorb some more of the nuance and things like that.
You got to be funny. Especially since there's there's the whole stereotype of the left being humorless. A stereotype which I think used to be far more deserved than it is now. A lot of left-leaning content online is shamelessly edgy. It used to be when far-right people on Twitter were, making a ruckus, the replies they would get from the left were always, how could you do this? Something like that, moral outrage. And now, most often, I think, if you go into the comments or like the replies below some big far-right tweet, it's mostly people making jokes, telling them to kill themselves, or making jokes about how they're a pedophile, or that they had sex with their mother, or something or another like that, which, if nothing else, indicates a far greater willingness to get one's hands dirty than the previous type of engagement the left, had. But, outside of that, that tendency, it's important to be funny and relatable and what have you. And it's also, I think, a fairly authentic representation of how I like to talk to people. But it's important to never understand the dunks as a substitute for other things, because you don't want them to be thought-terminating cliches. A good joke should be like an initiator for a good argument. If the good joke is the argument, what you're doing is you're hoping that your audience is careless enough to overlook the fact that you're skimping.
Yeah, for sure.